Well, it's another day and another project. The project for today is going to be a gavel and a sound block. So you can make the two of them together out of the same wood. It's a classic turned item, and I'm excited about making it. So we'll get started in just a moment, and you'll see all of the steps necessary to make your own. Okay, as we begin to turn our gavel, we'll start with the head. Now I've already put a block in the chuck, and I've turned it round to the 2 1/8 in diameter, and I've put my marks on it. I've got 3 sections here that I need to take down to 1 7/8, and that will leave the 4 sections that are raised where we'll turn the bead on it. So the first step is to get this turned down to the 1 7/8. I have the diameter marked on my calipers, so it'll be a fairly quick thing, and I'll go ahead and do that now, and I'm just going to use a parting tool to take it down. And then after we get that, we'll turn the beads, and then we can set up to drill the hole. So I'm going to go ahead and get started doing that. Okay, I have all 3 of my recesses cut down to the 1 7/8 according to the plans. And all I have to do is roll a bead on each one of these 4 places. These will be just straight beads, but the one on the end is going to have a cap on the end of that bead. So it's not going to be straight across flat here. It's going to have a dome across it after I turn the 1/4 inch bead. That's why we allow 3/8 of an inch. So we'll just use a bead cutting tool that will cut the beads easily. We'll do the tool on the inside first. Now we've got a little bit of extra that didn't get turned away, so we'll take that out with the parting tool. Now that just leaves the two on the outside. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn those with the same tool. Now you can see the excess that we have on either end, and that's the portion that we will turn into the dome. And I'll do that with a bowl gouge, and we'll just turn that on this end, and I can do it completely on this end. Now that gives me the dome I wanted on this end. This end, of course, is going to be a little bit harder to do, and we'll save that for last. The only other thing I need to turn is a 5/8 inch cove in the center of these. And there's several different ways that you could turn that cove. We want a 1/16 of an inch left solid on either side with a 5/8 inch cove in the center. And I think I'm going to just turn that with a hollowing tool rather than try to take it out with the bowl gouge. It might be just as easy to do it with this tool. I want the cutter right in the center, and we'll just turn that to the appropriate depth, and then and that pretty much shapes our head. All we have left to do is to take off this section down here and put our dome on this end, and then drill a hole in the center, and the head is finished. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to make this recess over here a lot deeper, and then I'll be able to shape this outside. But before I do all of that, I'm going to go ahead and do the final sanding while I can. And I'm going to go ahead and sand that, and then we'll get back and I'll show you how we finish off the end. Okay, we've done our final sanding on the bulk of this. The only thing left to sand would be the end cap over here. Now I'm going to go ahead and part this down quite a ways, and then I'll shape this side, and then I'll part it off, and then all I have to do is sand the dome on the end and drill the hole, and the head is finished. Okay, now I've got that down to about 1/4 of an inch, and I've got my shape on the end of the head. So I'm just going to go ahead and part it off, and everything else will be done by hand sanding on the end. So I have my head parted off, and there won't be that much work to get this sanded to match this end. So I'll do that, and then I'll show you how to drill the hole. Okay, we've got our mallet head completely turned, and now we need to drill the hole for the handle. Now it's very important that this hole be exactly on the center line. If it's off one side or other, which is easy to do if you don't have some kind of method for centering it, it's going to look funny. So it's important that you wind up in the center. Traditionally, this is done on a V-block on a drill press, and it works just fine that way. But I thought it'd be fun to just show you how you can also do it on the lathe. Now I have a Jacobs chuck in the headstock, and I have a 1/2 inch twist drill. Now, because I'm going to be going 1 3/8 inches deep, I want to use a twist drill instead of a Forstner bit. Forstner bits, when you start going deeper, tend to load up with the shavings, and that creates its own set of problems. So you can go a lot deeper, a lot easier with a twist bit than you can with a Forstner bit. Now, to hold the gavel head, we need a V-block. So this V-block I've built, it's about a 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood. It has an attachment block on the back that goes in the chuck. The only tricky part is this has to be mounted on the tailstock. Now to do that, you're going to need a reverse chucking adapter. Now this has the same threads as my chuck, and it has the number 2 Morse taper on the other end. So it's a simple thing to attach the reverse chucking adapter, and that just goes in the lathe. Now you mount the block that's on the back to the jaws on the chuck. Now the actual angle that you have is honestly not that important. The V is centered on the center line of the lathe. So if you were to rotate this thing 90 degrees, it would still drill the same hole because it's centered. Now, that's probably not the best camera angle, so I'm going to shift it so you might be able to see a little bit better. Now, all we need to do now is mark the center line. And the center line that we're marking is the one long ways. I just measured between the two beads, because that's where I want my handle. And just in that one axis. The other axis will be produced by the V-block. So all I have to do now to drill this hole is to slide the piece in and very carefully line it up with my mark. And once I have it exactly on the mark, I just need to hold it. I could turn the lathe on. It's already set for about 500 RPMs. which is where I want to drill at. And now it's just a matter of drilling the correct depth. Now, that gives me the hole in my handle perfectly centered. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to pay attention to when you locate that hole, and it's grain alignment. On a mallet like this, which is, a gavel is nothing but a fancy mallet anyway, I like to put the hole in line with the grain. So my hole is running the same direction as the grain on the piece. You could do it the other way, but if it's between, it kind of looks funny. So if you're going to do it, either do it with the grain or perpendicular to the grain. But the mallet head is now finished. It's ready to set it aside, and we'll work on the handle in the next segment. Now we're ready to start turning the handle. Now I've already put the blank in the lathe, then I've turned it round down to slightly over 7/8 of an inch, which is our largest dimension on the handle. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how I set it up and why I set it up this way. I could have put it between centers and turned it. I didn't want to do that because this way it's going to make it a little bit easier. I put it in a chuck with spigot jaws because we're starting with a blank that's only an inch in an inch square, and it won't fit in a number 2 jaw. So I've got it in the spigot jaws, and I've got it backed up and supported by the tailstock. Now I'm going to cut the tenon that goes into the head on this end first, and then I'll fit it to the head to make sure that I've got a good fit. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put it in a chuck. When I back the tailstock off a little bit to put the head on, I don't have to take it completely off. And the indentation that's made by the live center is not going to hurt me at all because that's going to be inside the head. And then I'll just part it off when I get to this end, when I put the last ball on the end of the handle. So that's why I laid it out the way I did. Anytime you're turning, now it doesn't really matter what it is, but the more complicated the piece, the more important it is to plan ahead. You need to know how you're going to hold a piece in every stage of the turning. And if you don't, it's real easy to paint yourself in a corner where you wind up in a position where you need to hold the piece to turn a certain part of it, and you can't hold it. There's no way to actually get it on the lathe to do that particular step. So you need to think ahead and plan out the entire process before you start, and then you won't wind up in trouble and painting yourself into a corner. But what I'm going to do first is I've marked off the 1 3/8 of an inch for the tenon, and I'm going to turn that down to a slightly over a 1/2 inch. I've got my calipers set to slightly over a 1/2, and then I'll test fit until I get a good snug fit with my head. And then I'll be able to put the tailstock back up and turn the remainder of the handle. that should give us the fit that we want. And now we'll move on to the next section. Okay, now I have my marks. I have 3 more marks laid out. This first one right here would be the largest diameter on the handle. So this has to sweep down and then fare into this 1/2 inch diameter down here. And that'll form a gentle curve that comes up to here. Then it'll come back down to here. And this I'm going to turn down to 15/32 with a parting tool. And then that will be the lowest, the smallest diameter at the section right here. So once I get this swept up to this diameter, I'll sweep it back down to the 15/32. And we're going to use an incremental approach. I'm not going to go ahead and part this down to reduce that diameter, which will make my whole spindle more prone to vibration. So I'm going to work it back to this line, and then I'll work the remainder of it back here. So we're going to do that with a bowl gouge. Okay, now we have it fared in fairly well from here back to here. Now it'll be time to do my parting cut down to the 15/32. Or just a little bit better than a half. So that's about right. Now we could use the bowl gouge and we'll fare this handle down to that smaller diameter. So that's fared in fairly well. Now the next step is to lay out the ball and get it laid out. Then we can do the detail here, and then we'll turn the ball and we're finished with the handle. So let me get that laid out and I'll be right back. Okay, now I have the final layout done. I have a line right here. That would be the end of the element that I'm going to perform right here that's just ahead of the ball. So I need to take this section down to the same diameter. And now in the middle of that I need a cove. And I'm going to just turn that cove with the scraper. And that'll be my cove. And now all I have to do is turn this ball on the end and sand it, and I'm pretty much finished with the handle. So we'll do that. Now most of this is going to have to be turned with the spindle gouge, so I might as well do that. And I know where it's going to end, so I'll define the end of the ball with that. And then I'll just roll the rest of it with the spindle gouge. Now that's a pretty good the shape on the ball. Now what I'm going to do now is sand it, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how I part this off. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this, and I'll be right back. Okay, we've got the handle completely sanded, and we're ready just to part it off and then do the finish sanding on the end, and our handle is done. So I'm just going to use the spindle gouge, and I'm going to turn this off. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You could move the tailstock back, but then it would be very fragile. There's only about 3/30 seconds holding it. Now, once I part it off, this part's going to stop turning. So I'm going to leave the tailstock in place, and I'm going to go ahead and finish that. And there's our handle. Just a small amount of sanding on this end, and we're finished. Now, we have the handle finished. I've got the sanding done on the end. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the fit. Now, you don't want this to be a force fit. You don't want to have to push this thing in really hard. You need room between the two pieces for the glue. So what you want is a good fit where there's no wiggle, but it still isn't so tight you have to force it in. You need to leave room for the glue. And the reason that we put the curve on the end right here is so once you put it in here, it seals completely against the hole, and you can't see any of the hole. So that's the way the handle was designed. It came out pretty good, and we have our gavel finished. The only thing left is to turn the sounding block, and we'll do that in the next segment. Okay, we're now ready to turn the sound block. Now, the sound block is just a simple block of wood, and the way it's constructed, with it being hollowed out a little bit on the inside, it amplifies the sound of the gavel hitting the wood. So it's louder than if you just hit a solid block of wood. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But because it's only an inch thick, if I put it in my chuck that's a half an inch deep, then I only have a half an inch of material to work with. And that's not quite enough for what we're going to be doing. So when I need a little bit extra material exposed, I use a filler block. Now this is 1/4 inch MDF. It's slightly smaller than the block, and I put that in the chuck first. Now when I put the block in, I'm only taking up 1/4 of an inch of my material in the chuck. So it gives me more material to work with out here. And then once we turn this side, then we can flip it over and hold it in expansion in the chuck and turn the other side. Now the first thing I need to do is to get the piece round. The reason I didn't try to make it round to begin with is because it's easier to hold a square piece of wood than it is a piece of wood that's just been rounded off on a bandsaw. So it's going to be a little bit more work to turn off all the corners, but this is the way that I do it. So we'll get that turned round. So we now have part of it round. We need to take this down to the 3 1/4 inch diameter that's shown on your plans. Currently, we are at 3 15/32. So we're a little bit under 3 1/2. We need to go down to 3 1/4. So I'm going to do the rest of that with the parting tool. Now there's our 3 1/4. Now, we've got a couple of things that we need to do to this. We need to turn a bead right on the edge and get the inside down to 3 inches in diameter after we roll the bead. And then we need to hollow out the inside, because this would be the bottom of our sound block. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that bead first. And I'm just going to use a bead turning tool. It just makes them a lot easier and a lot faster. I'm going to move that tool rest over here so I can get closer. I think all of that noise was just vibration from the tool bending. Now, there's our bead. Now, we're going to turn off this inside diameter down to the height of that bead. And just a little bit deeper. And that will give me the bead that I'm looking for. And now, the only other thing we need to do is to hollow out the inside. And I'm going to change that camera angle so you'll be able to see that a little bit better. So we'll be right back. Okay, we're set up now and ready to hollow the inside of our sound block. I've already marked and scribed my diameter. It's 2 3/8 of an inch. And because I'm going to use that to grip with the chuck jaws when I turn it around, I want the first 1/4 inch of this to be perpendicular. So we've got a good surface to grip with the inside of our jaws. So we now have first part of this done. Now the second part is just going to be a matter of taking that down. I'll use a bowl. Now the amount that you take off is up to you. You want to be a little bit careful. You don't want to take off too much and make it too thin at the top. I plan to leave about a 1/4 of an inch. I've taken off a 1/4 inch. Now I've got a 1 inch thick piece of wood. So I can actually take off another 1/2 an inch. And we'll just go ahead and do that. We're going to move this light over here so we can see a little bit better on the inside. Now, I've got the depth that I want. And since it's never going to be seen, I'm just going to leave it like it is. I'm going to sand this portion, and that'll finish off the turning from this position. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this and sand the bead, and then I'll turn it around and I'll grip this with the chuck jaws. And I'm going to go ahead and sand that off camera, and then we'll get it set up and do the last portion. Okay, we're all set now to finish turning our sound block. I've got it turned around and I've got it held in the chuck in compression, or rather in expansion. And all I have to do is turn this round. Now that should be fairly close to the 3 1/4. That's exactly 3 1/4. So now all I have to do is turn another bead on this end, level this out, clean up the inside sand the top, and I'm pretty much finished. Now we're a little high on this bead, so I'm going to just turn that down to a smaller diameter. And now this diameter matches this diameter, and I can finish cleaning up the inside here. Now the rest is just a matter of sanding, and I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. Then I'll be back and we'll see how all three pieces fit together. Okay, now we have all three of our pieces finished: the head, the handle, and the sound block. Now when it comes time for me to actually finish these two, I'm not going to glue it together first and then finish it. What I'm going to do is spray each piece with lacquer first. I'll mask off the tenon so I don't get any lacquer on that. And then once I have the two pieces coated with the lacquer, then I'll glue the tenon in place. The sound block is finished, and it's ready to finish. So once I get all of these pieces sprayed, then we'll take another look at them. Okay, all of the sanding is finished and the project is complete. I have it coated in lacquer and it's ready to go. It's not that difficult to build, you just have to be precise with your measurements and your turning. But it's a good project. It's small. It doesn't take up a whole lot of room in your collection, and it adds a nice touch when you've got this laying about, and you can tell people that you turned it. So I hope you enjoyed watching it. I hope you enjoyed making it. I certainly enjoyed creating the video.